Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 147 for Monday, June 28th, 2021. My name is Johnny, but the internet knows me as Pixel Riffs, and joining me, as always, is Joel Duggan. Hi, Joel.
Hello, sir. And if those listening would like to hear more about things like my barbecue escapades, farmers markets being back, and prohibition in Canada, which I didn't even know, you can check out the render distance. That is the extended version of the podcast, and you can find it at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. All you have to do is become a member, which supports the podcast, and then you get the extended version every single week.
Absolutely. And if this is, by some fluke, the first episode of the Spawn Chunks that you are listening to, I would really encourage you to go back and listen to our previous episode, because, of course, episode 146 was when we had King B-Dogs, Java developer, on the show just to talk about his participation in the Caves and Cliffs update and getting a ton of really awesome responses to that. Episode was pretty much the highlight of our week, so thank you so much for listening into that episode, and make sure you go back and check it out if you haven't already. Once again, if you feel like supporting us on Patreon, you can get the render distance, where we had an extra probably 20-25 minutes worth of chat with King B-Dogs before and after recording the main show, so if you want a little bit more of that conversation, that is right there. And since that episode, we've done a fair amount in Minecraft. Joel, what have you been up to?
I have been working on a farming project. I tried a little bit more of that dripstone build in the medieval city up. Still not super happy with it, but it's one of those things where I feel like I was beating my head up against the wall, and I just knew it was time to take a break. And I've been watching a lot of content from my favorite creators, all of whom are on new 1.17 worlds and using all the new blocks and doing all the new things. And I realized that one of the things I really wanted for the medieval area to start finishing up some of the landscaping and make it feel a little bit more part of the world is moss blocks. Mm-hmm. So I took a detour and went to the spawn chunks on the Citadel, which I don't visit very often. And I started building a self-powering moss farm. It's a design by Ilmango. I first saw it in one of his peaceful challenge videos, but he's since made a world download and a refined version. Now, this refined version puts out something like 6,400 bone meal a minute, or no, not a minute, an hour. It's bonkers. Like, it's just bananas the amount that this puts out. So I was also, rather than just copying the build, I wanted to learn something. I've never built a stone generator before because I never had to. And I knew that this thing was going to use a couple of different clocks that I wasn't familiar with either. So I adapted it to be, I call them Citadel size, which means that there's only 8 of us. This thing is going to be running constantly in the spawn chunks until we turn it off. So I didn't need it to be double speed, 6,400 bone meal an hour.
Yeah.
And he was doing it the most efficient way, which involved a lot of hoppers and a lot of composters and stuff. And I thought, I want this to look cool as well. So we've got it out in the middle of a lake, and the drops are actually going to be coming along like a log flume waterway going into the ground. And then we're going to find another place to put them and store them just next to our iron farm. So when people go to the iron farm on the server, they can also go to the moss area. They can get moss carpet, azalea bushes, flowering azalea bushes, and we're going to compost the rest. And what I'm doing is that the way that the module is set up is that there's 4 modules for bone mealing your moss. So it's a 14 by 8 area of stone that gets regenerated every time you use the farm. And we're taking 8 of those 14 spaces and storing them, and then we're taking 6 of those 14 spaces and just basically having the waters go in 2 different directions. And it's going to use the smaller, so like a 60-40 split. We're going to use the 40 to turn into bone meal and supply the farm with bone meal, and then anything that gets overflow gets dumped back into the system. So I don't have it all working as far as the refilling right now, but essentially there's a water elevator and then like a spiral water thing that kind of goes around it in like a cinnamon roll kind of design that feeds all the dispensers, and then anything that manages to get past them gets dumped back into the storage water system. So once it's all up and running, there's going to be items going every which way.
Yeah.
It's really, really fun. It was really cool to build. I learned a lot about like stone gen, and it was really interesting to see the reasons why Ilmango chose these specific blocks. There's target blocks and note blocks behind the stone generator.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got a lot to do with how target blocks now pull redstone signal towards them.
Like redirecting the redstone wire.
Yeah, and they're a solid block. And then Shroomlights are a solid block that's also non-flammable. So we've got fire tick turned off, so I didn't have to worry about the lava in this thing setting anything on fire, which is cool. Because otherwise I'd have to build it into something else other than logs, because it's meant to look like all the kind of loggy stone builds we have on the Citadel. But anyway, I've got a clip in our show notes for people listening. It's queued to the part of the end of the Twitch stream from the weekend, just before I turned it on. I turned it on to demonstrate it for, I don't know, 30 seconds. And I ended up with something like 6 stacks of moss.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And that's half the farm.
Yeah.
Now, understand that half of that is going to be turned into bone meal to fuel the farm.
Yes.
So there's a certain amount of loss, but I think we're going to be okay. And I don't think I'm going to have to go to a skeleton farm ever again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's what I've been up to.
It's absolutely wild. I think, so much community effort goes into designing these farms in the early stages, and what they evolve into is almost monstrous, but in a very good way. I've been considering making a moss farm myself, and we'll get into some of the kind of 1.17 farming stuff later on in our main discussion. But yeah, I expect that if you want to use this as a bone meal farm, incredibly productive, but you've got to remember that half of what you make is ending up being recycled back into the system because you need bone meal to spread the moss in the first place. Still a fascinating farm design, though, and I gotta say, it's always really cool seeing complex redstone contraptions built up when they look so organized once they're done. You know what I mean? Like when you have a contraption like the one you've got a screenshot of there that looks incredibly neat and stylish almost, and that's probably a lot of the work that you've done just to dress it up a little bit and make it fit its environment. But man, it looks cool when you got a fully set up redstone contraption like that.
Thanks, man. Yeah, and that's something that's I was doing as I was building it. The first kind of version of it on Saturday was all kind of dirt and stone, just kind of framing out where I wanted it to go. And then when I started to put things in like glass, I was making choices like, okay, well, it's a moss farm. I know I want to decorate it with dark oak and moss, so let's go with green glass. And the Shroomlights, I wasn't sure about them, but I thought, there's probably a reason why El Mango chose the specific block, so I'm going to use it. Also, it looks cool anyway, and I thought, well, he used iron bars along the top of his feeder system to get the bone meal up along the edge of the hopper waterway, and I used honey blocks for mine, and I used the honey blocks on purpose because they match the same color as the shroom blocks. Shroomlights. So I'm gonna try to do a bunch of stuff like that. I'm gonna light it from below. I'm gonna put some cool spotlights in the lake. I mean, the lake is a mess. I need to go in there and take out the sand and the gravel and try to make it look a little bit more like a lake bed and stuff. So it's gonna be a lot of fun. Probably in the next 2 streams. The next stream will be finishing up the functionality of everything and getting everything flowing into a storage system. And then the next one will be more of a decorative, how do I make this look cool? Have a lot of moss and leaves. And I think it'd be cool to get some flowering azalea bushes. And once I turn it on, I'll have all the blocks I'm going to use to decorate it. So it's going to look very specifically, this is producing these blocks,
Yeah, and you're going to have a lot of azalea. If my experience is anything to go by farming moss manually, you're going to end up with a lot of those bushes and shrubs to play around with.
Nice. So what have you been up to, man?
Well, speaking of the bushes and shrubs, I've been doing a little bit of terraforming around my desert this week on the Empire's SMP, because we've obviously been focusing on building over there, and I've done a few other weird things this week. We decided to do that thing where you go out to the end and don't fight the dragon, but still try and get to end cities. And instead of bridging out this time, I tried building a honey block flying machine that you can stand on the honey blocks, and because when honey blocks move, any entity on top of them is supposed to stay on there. You stick to it. That was going to carry us across the void. The first time around, unfortunately, we fell victim to lag about halfway across the void, and a ton of us just fell into the void and lost equipment. But then I had enough honey blocks saved up that I could build a safer version that actually had a backrest, so that we didn't just flop off the back of it when the machine moved and we didn't. So that went a little bit better. But then I decided to have a more peaceful time back in the desert. I was using a bit of moss and azalea and actually some bubble coral that I think goes really well alongside the blossoms in the flowering azalea, the kind of purple flower look. I decided to waterlog some slabs in this diorama and have bubble coral just kind of dotted around as like desert flowers, as though it is the kind of like flowers that you could put on cacti, without the spore blossom being in the game. I think it's the next best thing, and it looks really nice, having some gardens and some greenery and some life around the desert, backed up with formations of dripstone and a few water sources here and there to make little kind of pools and fountains that are kind of hydrating the landscape around them. So I'm having a lot of fun with just changing up the aesthetic of the desert a little bit, having the houses stand out as the piece of, the giant hunks of sandstone, but then obviously working with a few blue accents in the houses as well. And that's been creatively where my brain has been at lately. So really enjoying putting a bit more effort into that project.
I really like what you did with the bubble coral in amongst the flowering azalea. It's nice that those colors really jive together, and completely out of the coral context, it just looks like a flower.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yep.
I think the bubble coral is actually kind of renewable. It's not the blocks, it's the actual coral plants, and so you can bone meal in a warm ocean to get more of those.
Nice.
And so if I run out of them, I can just end up going back to that area and farming a few more.
Yeah.
Which is great. We don't have any kind of like renewable coral block recipe on the server, so I wanted to shy away from using the blocks themselves, but I think the actual plants look a bit better anyway.
The blocks. Sorry, the blocks would be a little bit much. I think they would probably just end up looking like a block as opposed to like a plant. I also really like what you did with the rooted dirt in with the looks like coarse dirt and bricks.
Yeah, bricks and granite, a little bit of jungle planks in there as well. Just working with that kind of like brown through pink kind of color palette, and again, sort of loosely inspired by like exposed copper and that kind of pinkish greenish hue that it's got. I sort of wanted to work some of that in, but honestly, I decided not to go too overboard with the paths, if only because when you're walking around on them, the sound of your footsteps changes every other block.
Right.
So I didn't want it to be like I'm walking on stone 1 second and planks the next, and then copper the next, and it has that very unique sort of noise the sort of metallic block noise when you walk on it. So decided not to vary it up too much, but I'll probably put a few more like accents and statues and stuff around the place, and I want to throw in a few more monument little kind of sections around these gardens so that they have a centerpiece every so often to make it stand out against all of the other examples of the garden that are around there.
This just popped into my head. Talking about walking over different things, and I think, if you walked over copper, it would sound like you're walking over like a manhole cover or something like that. Like it would be like that specific metal thing. I'm wondering if we're ever going to get copper trapdoors.
That'd certainly be an interesting addition. I would really enjoy it.
Yeah, it lines up with iron and all the different things that can be made out of iron, right? I don't know whether iron doors and iron trapdoors were like day one with iron. You had all that kind of stuff. I know hoppers weren't, but yeah, like that would be interesting, especially if it give you like something that would have the range of colors that copper does, and I guess the challenge would be like would it operate the same way as a iron one that would need to be powered to be flipped up and down?
Yeah. Or if there could be something else unique about it that it'd only open under different circumstances, or maybe it closed with a redstone signal instead of opening, or there's a few chances for it to be a little different there. But yeah, I do like the idea of expanding the copper block range beyond what we have already. And we've got some email about copper later on, which is going to be fun too. Outside of that, I've been working on my hardcore world a little bit more. I now have a very comfortable hobbit hole, and some netherite tools is the most recent thing I've done there, but I'm going to be working on making some basic early farms all this week. I think I'm going to be working on, farming sugarcane, maybe looking into a bit of dripstone farming as well, and just gathering a few resources here and there. And my last news comes from just last night. I won another of the Clash of the Creators events, which was super fun. We did a 1.16 advancement race. I think it would have been 1.17, but I think they're still waiting for some plugins to update that they use to connect all of the different servers that each of the teams are playing on, so we can all see when each other claims the advancements. But we were playing in 1.16. The twist this time was that it was ultra hardcore, so it was one life only and natural health regeneration was disabled. And thankfully, I was on a team with Slice Lime, Bruno Danoy, and Thomas to Space, all of whom were pretty experienced with playing half-hearted hardcore, so they're very good at not taking damage. And it was wild. It was very, very good fun. We managed to get some Oxeye Daisy Suspicious stews together quite quickly, so we could have a bit of the regen effect from those, so we didn't need to go farming, golden apples and that kind of stuff. But yeah, we came out on top by, I think, close to 30 points in the end, and you got 3 points for getting an advancement first, and then 2 points if you got it second, third, fourth, or fifth. So it was going to be a pretty close race regardless, but we were the first team to get to the end. I was riding around on a Strider looking for bastions and ended up dying in lava with about 10 minutes left on the clock. Sliced Lime and Bruno fought the dragon. Bruno died in the process, but Slice managed to kill it, went through the end gateway, and immediately spawned above, or I think in, one of the end city ships, because the gateway spawned basically directly above the mast. And I don't know how that happened. I think it's just the position of the end city and the way that the game looks for locations for those end gateways meant that was the nearest accessible block for it to spawn on, and they must have chosen that seed just for that, because I think once you open up a seed, the first gateway that you open up always goes to the same place. Oh, okay. So anybody who's got the seed, and I think I still have it somewhere that I can share, it will do the same thing. It went directly above the mast of this end city ship, and so as soon as he went through, got the advancement for traveling out to the islands in the first place, immediately got the end city advancement as well, and then 3 seconds later he had Elytra. So it all happened at once, right at the end, but it was such a cool experience.
Were there other players still online when that was happening? Because they those things ticking up in your chat would have been just like, what is going on?
Yeah, I do think I want to go back and see some of the other perspectives, mostly to see how the other teams did and how they kind of organized themselves, because we had a spreadsheet going and stuff. We were a little bit more kind of organized about it, but I think it would be really funny to see other people's reactions of how are they doing that so quickly, or if anybody's even paying attention at that point because they're all focused on their own stuff. But yeah, I always enjoy being part of these events when I can make it to them, and it's just a lot of fun, using that survival Minecraft knowledge again, but always just in a different context. And I'm really looking forward to when they can update that format to 1.17, because there's going to be some really cool things you can do in this next update. Let's move on to the news, though. And there's fairly little news this week, actually. We have no Java pre-releases last week, and we linked to Slice Lime on Twitter just confirming that they were taking this week off from pre-releases, although presumably not from development itself. There might be some this week, so keep your eyes peeled for probably another pre-release or maybe a release candidate for 1.17.1 on Java. Bedrock Edition did get a beta, a small beta, as 1.17.20.20, and some highlights from the list of bug fixes and parity changes that I picked out here include monster spawning in the Nether being changed to more closely match Java Edition. There will now be a maximum of 15 to 20 mobs around the player in the Nether instead of 30 to 40. Swords will now break bamboo in a single swing. They've disabled biome tinting for spruce and birch leaves. Target blocks will now conduct redstone signals, and teleporting mobs between dimensions no longer causes mobs to despawn.
Optifine has released pre-release 24. That's at Optifine News on Twitter. Shaders support was added in pre-release 22, although still in a bug-fixing phase as of pre-release 24. Optifine is 96% done, according to the Optifine News Twitter account. Worth noting that other options for performance tweaks and visual enhancements are available for folks who want them. Iris for Fabric is a good one to look at if you're wanting shaders without Optifine.
Yeah, I thought that was worth bringing up because a few people have recommended Iris to me and said that it had shaders support before Optifine. So if playing with shaders is your bag, you absolutely can't do without them, then Iris, alongside some of the other performance tweaks like Sodium and so forth, I think are the way people go if they don't want to rely on Optifine being ready. But the Bedrock Edition beta kind of took a look at that changelog and thought, oh, there's some pretty cool changes here for technical players, especially looking at teleporting a mob between dimensions, not causing the mob to despawn. That's a mechanic that a lot of people rely on in Java for, getting mobs out of the overworld mob cap and into the nether so you can farm them better that way. And I'm not certain what the restrictions were on Bedrock, but good to know. The bamboo thing is actually kind of huge because there's just every so often there's stuff about the way you break blocks in Bedrock Edition that is less convenient than Java. I'm thinking in particular of bamboo and scaffolding, because scaffolding is a one punch and it breaks the entire tower in Java Edition, whereas in Bedrock Edition it takes much longer to break the individual block of scaffolding before the rest of it will fall, and something about that just makes it feel way less convenient to use. So it's really cool to see that stuff like that is being changed out. And honestly, the monster spawning in the nether one, I mostly bring that up because having experienced the nether in Bedrock Edition and quite how many ghasts there are floating around most of the time, it's probably quite a relief to some Bedrock players to find that the overall threshold of mobs in the nether has been decreased a little bit.
Yeah, I wasn't aware that it was that different. Like, that's a sizable change for number of mobs around you in the nether.
And it's quite funny because of how few mobs you typically encounter in the overworld. Like, the night in the overworld on Bedrock is pretty playable compared to Java, where you, if you're out in the open in the middle of nowhere, you're defending yourself more or less constantly. Yeah. I find myself running around quite a lot at night if I ever play in Bedrock. So I think it's potentially a rebalance of some of that, and I wonder if overworld spawning is going to be brought up to match, because I know the Nether has always been more hectic on Bedrock than it was on Java. So sort of the reverse situation.
No, it's interesting. I haven't spent much time in Bedrock on the PC, but I remember from watching a couple of other videos recently, I think it was when they were doing the big changes in the mountain biomes, when they were doing the data pack tests. I didn't realize that they did not have spruce and birch leaves maintaining their color, because they had something that Java does not have, which is the spruce leaves changing to a kind of like a frosty white when they're covered with snow. In Bedrock. And I remember seeing that in a video going like, why don't we have that in Java? So it's odd to me sometimes when you see these changes that are obviously in the course of parity and making things, a little bit more seamless across the board. And you see them, you're kind of like, how is this? Why was it different? It seems like such small changes, and you wonder why they've been so long in being updated. I'm sure there's a reason. I just don't know what that reason is.
Yeah, I think the reason is probably often that there are things which take higher priority than sort of minor aesthetic tweaks like that. I think it's really the resurgence and the rise of more prominent Bedrock content creators. I mean, aside from the folks back in the day who kind of popularized playing on Xbox Edition and so forth, like the rise of a Bedrock player community that rivals the Java community in terms of their overall commitment to vanilla Minecraft and not just using it as a platform for education or entertainment, I think has led to this call for more parity features and for things to be more similar between the two versions, because that way you can have that attention to detail and you can start producing the same sort of stuff that people see in Java Edition videos. There's very little difference between the two. Then you get more people being able to emulate what they see other players doing regardless of version, which I think is only a good thing for a game like this.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if there's going to be an update to Sodium for 1.17. At least I haven't seen any murmurs about it in my circles. If anybody listening knows, these SpawnChunkMail, at gmail.com, let us know, because I'm still using Optifine. I use Fabric, obviously, on the Citadel. We run Lithium for tick performance. Phosphor has not yet been updated to 1.17. OptiFabric has, and that's how you run Optifine on Fabric. So I didn't know about Iris, and I have not yet used it. But if it's something that needs to be used with Sodium, then I don't know how people are using it on 117.
I don't think it is. I think that's just my bad not
right. So
not doing my research on Sodium.
It's basically like Optifine is one thing, and then Sodium, Iris, and possibly other things are like the same things that Optifine does, but broken up into 3 different mods instead of just
like
one.
Modular kind of arrangements.
Okay. That's interesting because anecdotally, we're having some lag issues on the Citadel, and I know that there has been multiple kind of like moaning and groaning for me over the last few years about whenever Minecraft does update, and I know that I do have a computer that sometimes causes issues, but this was. All 3 of us last night were playing like in the evening, just kind of hanging out, myself, Anna Marie, and Alistair. And we were all experiencing between like 800 and 900 game ticks behind. Like you couldn't pick up items. I was having trouble flying. It was nearly unplayable. And I don't know about you, and I don't know about the servers that you've been playing on, but I've just found, even before last night, that 117 just happens to be laggier than before. Like I don't know, like I can't say for sure, but it has that feel. Like things like bouncing around with Elytra just seems to be happening a lot. I feel like my being tracked as a player just does not seem to be quite as precise. Like if I'm doing anything with scaffolding and water, I almost want to take off my Elytra because I end up just kind of doing that weird floaty bounce thing all the time. And it's just like, I just want to get out of this one high block of water. And the game is like, nope, you have to float gently to the ground over the next 40 seconds before we're going to let you do anything. And it's just like, oh, come on. Now, again, part of that is like my own impatience of like, I just want to finish this build and like I just want to get out of the water. But it has felt a little bit, kind of chuggy to me. And so it's hard. And again, I want to be very clear, not throwing any shade at Mojang Studios, because between my computer, the server running Fabric, and other third-party mods, like it just, it could be anything. I don't know. Maybe Lithium is meant to help, but is not doing its job right now. I don't know. But anecdotally, I just feel like it's been like that since we switched over to 117.
The big problem we're having on Empire's SMP in particular, and I believe Hermitcraft is having the same issue, is that every time you grow a tree, it seems to lag the world out, and we're not certain what's causing this, because a few people have tried to troubleshoot things and haven't had the same issue, or have been having trouble reproducing it. But especially if you grow any kind of 2x2 trees, so jungles, dark oaks, and tall spruces, I think it may be something to do with either lighting updates or the fact that the leaves all have to detect how close they are to a log. But something about growing those trees lags out the server for up to a few seconds. And so, whenever anything especially laggy happens and you find yourself running the same few blocks that you were running a couple of seconds earlier, everyone immediately starts typing in the chat, "Who's growing trees?" and it's almost become a point of fun, although it can be a little frustrating at times. It's made me quite happy that I'm in the desert and I'm not building with too much wood out there. It's mostly sandstone and copper that I'm using in my pallets, so the wood can last for a little while longer without me having to farm trees too much.
Something that I do know is not just me, because we've had several people in Twitch chat confirm it when talking about the update, and people saying like, how's it going, and just that kind of thing. There's no damage that happens, but the sound effect and visual effect of falling when you go through another portal.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like that's been happening, and it's like, again, nothing's wrong. And once you realize you're not taking any damage, you're like, okay, well, nothing's wrong. But it's still unsettling that you get that like ankle breaking crack noise, like whenever you go through a portal. It's weird.
It's a little bit scary, and anything that looks like you're falling into the void, you always get that moment where your stomach kind of falls out from below you at a certain point. But I'm sure these are all just teething problems, and hopefully if Mojang provides any kind of stability fixes for servers, then that's great. If the mods can update to provide better stability for servers, also great. Or if we just kind of figure out what on earth we can do to resolve some of that stuff. I don't think it's usually too much of a problem, but it's always the teething problems of an early update. And I'm hoping this is not too much of a prelude to server issues in 1.18, but just knowing with the world height and depth getting larger, I have my my reservations about how easy it's going to be playing on servers in 1.18. But we will see. Lots of progress to be made on that score, I'm sure.
I feel like I'm going to be waiting longer with 118 to see how it goes before we update the Citadel.
Put the feelers out, kind of get the lay of the land a little bit.
And I know despite us having some lag issues now, I'm going to wait to see what happens with these pre-releases for 1.17.1 because I don't want to, because it's such a pain in the butt to update the fabric thing every time. I'm just going to wait to see if we get through, like it was 1.16 went to like 0.5, I think, before it was done. So I'm going to see if we get like a 0.2 or a 0.3 before we finally update, unless of course 0.1 comes out with a couple of bugs that very specifically address like tick and entity lag and something.
Let's get into the email because we got a couple of emails to get through this week.
Sounds like a plan. If you would like to email the show, the email address once again is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. Please use that email address. We don't check anything else. From Rocks, Waxing Copper, and Axolotls. Hello, Jonny and Joel. Specifically to Johnny, well, fine, I feel left out, who is a copper lover. As of right now, we can only wax copper when they are blocks. If they are slabs, stairs, you would not be able to wax them. This would be quite inconvenient for a player if they forgot to wax the block before cutting it into slabs and stairs. Do you think Mojang should allow players to wax copper while it's in the stairs and slabs state? Another thing, 1.17.1, a player can only find blue axolotls when breeding other axolotls, which is to balance Bedrock and Java. Do you think Mojang should have made it so Bedrock players can find wild blue axolotls or keep it as it is coming in 1.17.1? I feel this change would make players go out to explore again to find the blue axolotl. I would love to hear your opinions. That's it for now. Cheers, Rocks.
So first of all, what?
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
To the copper point, as far as I can tell, this is a misconception. This, like, I have been waxing slabs and stairs both by right-clicking on them with honeycomb and by crafting them in a crafting interface, and it works fine for me. Crafting recipes are fine. You can't do it using the stone cutter when you cut the block initially, but then you can wax it just fine in your 2x2 or 3x3 crafting interface afterwards. And I've tested this on Bedrock Edition, and it's also the same result. When we got this email, I thought, well, maybe this is a Bedrock player who's writing in. Nope, same thing. You can wax it when it's placed. If you right-click on it with honeycomb, you can wax it in your crafting interface. So all I'm thinking is maybe the blocks you're attempting to wax are already waxed, and you didn't notice or something, but you can definitely do it. A good way to tell if a block has already been waxed, aside from, if you can't look at it or pick it up and look at it with your mouse over in the inventory, or you don't have access to the debug screen that we have on Java to look at it and it will say waxed cut copper stairs or whatever it is. You can right click on it with an axe and that will scrape the wax off. And so if you get a waxy noise instead of the kind of scraping noise and the copper reverting to the previous stage, then that copper was already waxed. That's the only solution I can think of, because as far as I can tell, the first paragraph of this email, they seem to be laboring under a misconception. Copper can be waxed in whatever block form you convert it to, slabs, stairs, it all works the same way. So not certain what this person has run into in particular. Maybe if they had seen that in a pre-release or something and haven't played with it since 1.17 has been out, but it works just fine for me.
I think it's worth noting that there are some texture packs out there too, like from Vanilla Tweaks, that just put like a highlight around the wax copper block in your inventory. Yes, so that's another good helping hand if you're on Java and can download that as a resource pack. The second half of this email is the blue axolotl question, which I think is a little bit more interesting. There's currently a 1 in 1,200 chance that a blue axolotl spawns naturally in Java Edition, but in Bedrock Edition they can only be bred, and as of 1.17.1 they are changing it so that they do not spawn naturally at all in Java Edition. And honestly, I think that's okay, just based on the fact that when I've been exploring out in the wild, mostly in caves, I've seen maybe 4 or 5 axolotls. And I know this because basically every time I find one, I think, oh, a stranded axolotl, let me pick it up in a bucket and take it home. Because I always feel bad for them just kind of vibing in caves in, water streams coming out of the walls.
But so, considering how infrequently we run into axolotls at this point, I think it's pretty unlikely that you would ever find the blue ones by exploring. It took a long time for anybody to be able to breed them, and they were breeding them intensively. I think it took somebody on the first couple of days of 1.17, it took them 10 hours or so to breed one. And it's still a pretty low chance for them to spawn through breeding. So the idea of being able to explore to find one seems unrealistic, and also the necessity of exploring isn't really met in that, because you could stumble into one randomly in a cave, but there is also no guarantee that a certain amount of exploring would lead you to find a blue axolotl. So honestly, I think it's cool that they are rare, and stumbling into one naturally in the world would be enormously fun, but the fact that that's going to happen to so few players, I think, is what's motivating them to change that as of 1.17.1 and making it a breeding-only variant. One thought about this, though, is that there's always the chance this could end up being reverted in 1.18, because at that point, aquifers get introduced, there's a greater opportunity to find axolotls just swimming around in underground pools or lush caves or wherever they end up spawning in the next update, and so maybe at that point, there will be more opportunity for players to find large groups of axolotls, and maybe they will have spawned in greater numbers, and there'll be a higher chance of you finding one in the wild, at which point, yeah, they could revert it back to a natural spawn chance for the rare variant. But honestly, yeah, I don't think most people are going to be able to encounter one if they continue the way that they are, so I think it's nicer to give players the option to just keep breeding them up, rather than imagining that they can stumble into one in over 1,000 axolotls and it'll be a blue one.
Yeah, to me it just has like a Pokemon vibe, right? Collect them all.
This is the shiny variant. It's the rare alternate color palette version, and I think the odds of getting a shiny Pokemon are around the same. And having tried that in the past, it is honestly not worth it. Let's move on to the second email, though. This one comes in from It Just Dirt. Excellent username there. And the subject of this one is riding goats. Hey, Jonny and Joel. I've recently started a new survival world for the 1.17 update. After finding some wild goats, I stood next to them to see if they'd ram into me. I stood for a good few minutes, with them barely moving, and I wondered if they could have a more interesting use. After Mojang added the disappointing mechanic of llamas, I felt there was a missed opportunity to give goats a new interesting mechanic to differentiate them from other passive mobs. My idea for goats being more interesting would be to incorporate some sort of riding mechanic. Similar to horses, you could get goats with different speeds and maybe jump heights. The goat horn could also be used to make your goat speed up and run even faster. I think Mojang could also somehow incorporate ramming into that feature, and I would like to hear your thoughts. It Just Dirt drove their goat too fast. I feel like the sign-offs are now just all death messages, which is a little bit ominous. But Joel, your thoughts on the goat riding question?
Goat, jousting, PvP, done. It's probably one of the few things that would get me into PvP and interested in goats. I think goats are going to be fun for my medieval town aesthetically, but I don't see myself really using them for much. I don't see myself using them as a goat powered farm. I mean, it'd be fun maybe, but if like any other mob, they seem like they're going to be a pain in the butt to wrangle around. And we have that collectible, you got to find a screaming goat, to make the farm more efficient, in the way that we've received notes on goats in the last few weeks. So I think adding riding goats would be fun. I think it would be unique. There's a lot of stuff about Minecraft that doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, you can ride a pig, you can't control it. Or no, you can control it? How does that work?
I mean, you have a carrot on a stick. It just doesn't go very fast. Is the thing about pigs.
Right. So you need the carrot on the stick, and the pig doesn't go very fast. So, like, to have a goat where maybe the goat doesn't travel very fast horizontally, but if you jump with a goat, you can do like the 5 or 6 or 8 block kind of like leap, which would be fantastic for trying to get up into a shattered savanna or a mountain biome, or the new mountain biomes when they come out in 1.18. I just think it'd be really fun. I don't know how you would tame a goat. I guess you just feed it until it likes you, or maybe you need, a carrot on a stick to kind of like say, okay, well, if you can use a carrot on a stick with a pig, then maybe you can use the carrot on a stick with the goat. I like, the fun that you have with striders, with fungus on a stick in the Nether in early game. And I think that having X on a stick with mobs could just add some silly fun to the game. And then you end up with people that are really savvy with, the inner workings of Minecraft, creating some really cool things with that, right?
Yeah, I do like the idea of being able to ram people whilst riding a goat, or, have that as an effective way to attack other mobs, because let's be real, mounted combat has never been particularly easy in this game. And I think it's because the mount itself kind of is what you're controlling. You don't have a great deal of control over your player separately from the horse that you're riding, or the pig, as it may be. And a lot of the time, letting go of that to change, weapons and to do stuff means losing control of the animal. Like if you're riding a strider around, you have to have a warped fungus and a stick in your offhand if you want to shoot at ghasts with a bow in your main hand. And I don't think that option is even available to people on Bedrock Edition because of the offhand being limited. So there's so many different things to which the mob itself would be such a useful thing if it had some kind of built-in attack feature, which goats do. So yeah, I think goats are worth it on their own for the ramming mechanic. I think that's the thing that distinguishes them from other mobs like llamas. And I find the prospect of riding them could add a lot of depth to the game. It might be difficult to implement, and Mojang might not necessarily see the value in another mob that people aren't going to ride all that much. But I think if you add in the ability for players to control its behavior in terms of the ramming stuff, then yeah, I see that being quite fun. I also like the idea maybe of having some variants with the screaming goats where they are harder to control somehow. So if you end up with a screaming goat, they end up being a little bit more volatile and having more of like a mind of their own, considering that they're the more aggressive ones in the first place. I'm wondering about the goat horn and what purpose that may hold. And something about this email made me think, I wonder if They mentioned the goat horn being able to use to like speed your goat up and have it run even faster. I like the idea of, even if you're not riding the goat necessarily, blowing the goat horn and then all of the goats in the area end up ramming something. Like it triggers the goat ramming behavior. That being almost like a kind of call to arms for the goats would be kind of fun. And I think maybe holding out for what purpose goat horns have might see a few more people understanding why goats are in the game as of 1.18. Whatever they've got in mind for those, I'm hoping that it's something that justifies the existence of the goat a little bit more if riding isn't introduced.
I like the idea of being able to control the ramming ability and even maybe give it like a cooldown. It just reminds me of other dash abilities that you have in games like Minecraft Dungeons, like you have like a certain amount of timer before you have to turn it down. And I'm thinking about all the mini games, like thinking like Hungry Hippo, like you two players start on a field of zombies and the first player to ram all the zombies off the cliff wins, or two players ramming into each other. Like if you could use a shield while you're on the back of a goat, and as long as you use the shield before you hit whatever you're going into, depending on the damage the goat is doing, like the first player that has a broken shield loses the match. There could be a lot of really, really fun stuff.
Yeah, I don't think there are enough mechanics in the game when it comes to transport that allow for variable speed. And like, minecarts, you can do a couple of things with powered rails and spacing out powered rails to guarantee that players are traveling at a certain speed. You can make a pig faster by boosting it with a carrot on a stick, and you can make a strider faster by boosting it with a warped fungus on a stick. But for horses, they're pretty much always traveling at the same speed. The player has a couple of different, you've got sprint and sneak speeds and so forth, but for the most part, you are always traveling at a fixed speed just based on the stats of whatever it is you're riding or the environment that you're riding in. And I would love there to be some sort of mechanic for goats where they would move at a decent clip, but then, you could spur them on or speed them up and cause them to sprint. I think that'd be a really fun idea. For our main discussion topic this week, we have farming resources in 1.17, because we were discussing this earlier in the show that Joel and I now have a bit more experience in 1.17, acquiring and farming some of the newer materials, and even having some new approaches to farming older materials. And so I thought we could have a discussion about what approaches we found work best, if we find these effective enough for now, or if we're still holding out for 1.18 to add more materials into the game, more access to these materials, and what we feel is still missing from the approaches that we currently have. So, Joel, what have you been farming lately? We've heard about your moss farm already. So what else have you been digging into in 1.17?
So with the dripstone roof that I did a couple of weeks ago, I've been thinking a lot about like how and where on the server we want to put like a dripstone farm for me, because I'm going to be using the texture. It works well in a couple of different ways, but it's a slow process. Like a dripstone farm is something where you want to start to set it up. Think about like your first days in a server and you've got one piece of sugarcane. Like you kind of have to just put it somewhere where you're going to see it all the time. And every time you walk by, you're going to chop it in half and plant more. And you're going to keep on repeating that process. You're not really going to collect it. The idea is that you're just spawning more growing roots to work from with the sugarcane. And that's the same thing with the dripstone. Like you need a solid block of dripstone and a pointed dripstone as well as a water source on top of it. And then you just have to like line more and more and more of those up. And if you have a surface that's 9 blocks below the pointed dripstone above it, you'll also get stalagmites, and you'll get more pointed dripstone forming at the bottom as well as the top. But that's kind of like where you have to start. I've not done anything automatic outside of the snapshot world that I did. And once I got about 16 modules, and I forgot about it, and I went off to do other things, that's when I would come back to the chest and realize, oh, there's a stack of pointed dripstone in there. Now, that only gets you, 16 blocks, because you have to do a 2x2 crafting grid. So it's one of those things that as you get more of it, you do start to accumulate, a larger size farm. The thing would be, if you need a lot of it right now, you're going to have a frustrating experience. But if you want to just play the long game and build a farm to constantly collect it, especially if you can have something automated with either a piston and an observer that's watching the pointed dripstone, or you can use a flying machine to swing back and forth. People have seen this kind of stuff before with bamboo farms and sugarcane farms. The flying machine falls or swings along and cuts off all the stuff below a certain point, leaving the pointed dripstone to then grow more later on. It's just a matter of whether you want a flying machine either constantly going back and forth or on a timer. The ones that I've seen are on a daylight timer, so they just kind of go once a day, which is nice because then you don't have a flying machine constantly flying back and forth in your world. So the problem that I have with the decision to do dripstone farming is where to put it. Like, do you want it on display or do you want to hide it? Either way, they're not small. If you want a lot of dripstone, you need a lot. Like, you need a big farm to have that yield, a lot of blocks for you to play with.
Yeah.
So that's one challenge there.
I think for folks who are interested in getting a lot of dripstone blocks, I would honestly recommend just trading with a stonemason. If you have a 1.17 stonemason, there's a chance that instead of that polished granite or polished diorite trade, they will trade you dripstone instead. And if you're after the blocks, then definitely get hold of that, because that's like 40 dripstone for a handful of emeralds. And I think just keeping the farm for pointed dripstone, presuming you plan to use that in combination with the regular dripstone, is probably for the better. Because, I think that crafting recipe being a 2x2 means that you get, like, you really don't get a whole lot out of the pointed dripstone to block recipe. And so, I'd look at other ways of getting that. I would honestly go caving, I think, before I turned the pointed stuff into the blocks themselves. But I think maybe for like a skyblock scenario or something like that, it might work a little better. But in the meantime, I see myself getting the blocks a different way.
Yeah, I was lucky when I went looking for other things. I was looking for copper and I was looking for a geode. I managed to find a couple of really large dripstone deposits in a ravine, and it wasn't a special ravine. I wasn't keeping it for anything. It looked cool, but I harvested the whole thing. I just dug it all out of the wall, and that got me started quite quickly with, I didn't really have to farm the blocks that I was using in my dripstone roof. I just had them because I collected a couple of stacks from a ravine. So like there are ways, depending on how lucky you get, to get more of it. I mean, it depends too, because sometimes like people like building redstone farms. It might be something fun to do, and it could be, depending on how you do it, it could be something that could be worked into a build too. Like you could line, if you already have like a waterway or something in your world that could be used to collect the dripstone. If you just set the dripstone up above it, like you could just, if you already have the infrastructure, it could be kind of cool. The thing that I've been looking at to move away from the moss conversation I've already had is getting into things like rooted dirt and trying to figure out like what's going to happen there, because you've mentioned that you use azalea trees to now harvest oak in a better way, because then you get your oak, you get your flowering azalea and your azalea leaves, and you get the rooted dirt underneath it. How do you feel about just the single piece of rooted dirt? Do you want it to be more?
I would like there to be more, because I imagine it's sort of spreading, not quite as big as podzol from giant spruce trees, but at least like a couple of blocks out. If you're going to have roots for a tree that size, then they're going to be relatively large anyway. And I know that the intention is not to, end up generating blocks into stuff that players have already built. But I think as far as converting dirt goes, you could stand to check a 3x3 area around that and maybe turn those into roots as well. But yeah, I think it's been manageable enough, considering that I'm not using rooted dirt for a whole lot except occasional path blocks. Like if I wanted to make an entire path or a larger build out of the stuff, then I expect I'd find it more tedious. But as it is right now, because I'm farming rooted dirt from azalea and I'm farming azalea to get hold of oak wood, it's actually not been too bad for me. Like I've definitely got at least a stack or so after I've been doing all of these paths, so I found it not too bad. But yeah, I think it could benefit from something else in future, and this is something where finding a naturally generated azalea tree in the wild to find a lush cave is also going to yield a ton of those root blocks as they travel down from the surface. So there will be a way of getting hold of them outside of farming them yourself. You just got to find one of those trees in the first place.
Yeah, the issue that I have with that is usually that this is just me, my own personal playstyle. I see stuff like that, and I'm the green, tree hugger in me doesn't want to rip it all out. It's like, it's really cool. That looks awesome. As it, the roots are hanging from the roof of the cave. Like I should really leave this as it is, and I'll get one. So I think that we've been talking on the Citadel amongst ourselves about a number of custom crafting recipes that I think we're going to implement in 1.17 in order to get our hands on some of this stuff. And I think we're going to go with something with rooted dirt. I think just like everything else, we wanted to have it gated. Like you need to have the roots, or you have to grow the azalea tree first, and then you can get the roots, and maybe you combine the roots with dirt or coarse dirt, maybe to again just kind of like make it a more complex crafting recipe, something that you just can't get like from like easy mode. I feel like that could be interesting. I don't know if it's if a data pack is something that you could use to then change the way that rooted dirt spawns underneath an azalea tree, because my brain was on right in line with yours in terms of like a 3x3 area of like a random number of blocks in that 3x3 area would become rooted dirt, just 6 of the 9 or something like that would just kind of like get you what you wanted. I was thinking that it would be neat for people that really want to do like the big farms, if you're going to be using like a tree farm, if you've got pistons that are breaking leaves and stuff. When those pistons break leaves blocks as they smush a tree down, do the leaves get destroyed?
Yeah, I mean they get broken, but they still drop stuff.
They still drop.
As though they've been broken by a player or naturally decayed.
Right. Yeah. So if you had a hopper collection at the bottom, you could basically like do an azalea tree farm and get your flowering azalea bushes and your azalea tree bushes and stuff like that. The problem, of course, in that is that you can't make dirt in the same way that you can make stone. Like there's cobble generators and stone generators. You can't do that with dirt. So it's if that was the case, then you could constantly have a new piece of dirt to then grow a single azalea tree on, and you just have this stream of rooted dirt coming out of the tree farm in the same way that you'd have your logs, and that would be really cool. But you can't do that with dirt, as far as I know. I'm not sure what you would have to do. I guess you would just have like some sort of like eating machine that would just eat the countryside and force dirt into your tree farm. I'm not sure how that would work. But yeah, to talk about some of the things that I think have been harder to get, drip leaf. We've been, all of us, on the server for a couple of weeks now, to the point where there's actually a little bit of RP going on where if you see a wandering trader, you absolutely walk up to them because they might have a drip leaf. If they don't, then it's licensed to basically remove the wandering trader from the world. Many traders have died to bring us this information.
Right? I mean, like, it's the same way on Empire's SMP right now. We are, like, we've spent a month in that server, I think, so far, without any access to drip leaf of any kind. And it's the small drip leaf that he will trade you. You can grow the big drip leaf from there. But my problem then becomes there is no way to get small drip leaf again out of a big drip leaf plant. So if, like me, I would love to have put some small drip leaf into this, like, desert garden that I'm now building. Don't have any, and if I get any from the Wandering Trader, it's going to be about 5, and I can only turn that into big drip leaf if I want to farm it. Outside of that, it's back to waiting for another Wandering Trader to show up, and it's entirely random, which that's the mechanics that frustrate me, is when you're effectively just waiting for RNG to shine down on you and give you the block that you want, as opposed to something you can actively go out looking for, like a moss block in a shipwreck or something. Like, it's just going to be a matter of the numbers at that point. You know, how many shipwrecks can you visit before you get one that's got the right chest and it's got the right contents? That is going to be at least something the player can be proactive about. And yeah, I think obviously when 118 comes around, availability of drip leaf is going to skyrocket, but at that point I think it will feel like a footnote compared to all of the other changes. And so yeah, I really want to get hold of it for some building. I know my server mates are also very keen on getting hold of some, and I don't think anybody really wants it for big drip leaf. Everyone's just so happy that small drip leaf exists and it looks nice that they want to get hold of some of it. But man, the first Wandering Trader that shows up is going to be mobbed by people. And the problem with it is that Wandering Traders' inventories are global, so if one person trades with them, that trade is locked for all of the other players. So whoever holds the small drip leaf at the end of the day may end up having the keys to the entire server, I think, at that point.
Oh, man. Yeah, that to me is something where you think the big drip leaf would like drop small drip leaf without silk touch, or give you, big drip leaf if you had silk touch. Like, I feel like there needs to be a better farming mechanic for it. Just correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that small drip leaf has to be placed in water and or on clay.
Yeah, in water or on clay, I think is there might be a couple of other blocks. Maybe it goes on moss as well, but it needs like a damp environment, basically, is the idea. I honestly would love to have it added to fishing loot tables somewhere or something like that. Something like lily pads, where you can farm it some way, and it might require a specific biome to do that, but at least you could get it from a jungle the way we do bamboo or something. And I would much prefer to get hold of it that way compared to just waiting around for a finite supply of the stuff, considering how I want to use it right now. But I'm looking forward to getting hold of it when eventually we do. And in the meantime, yes, gleefully slaughtering Wandering Traders.
I like the idea of something really inventive, like some sort of botany, like a crafting recipe, like a lily pad and a potion of strength. It gives you small drip leaf or something. Like, I gate it, like, still make it something that you have to get to the nether, you have to have a brewing stand, you have to get the ingredients for the potion, you have to have a swamp nearby, you have to get a lily pad, like, have that kind of a list to get this thing and unlock it. So, like, it's not just handed to you, but being able to craft it at expense, I think would be good. In some way.
I've wanted to have that conversation for a while about how some of my favorite mechanics in Minecraft, while they are fairly esoteric, are the ones that are like, you splash a zombie villager with a weakness potion and then feed it a golden apple. And it's stuff like that. It's the odd, like you said, botany or alchemy kind of feeling reactions that lead to acquiring different resources or some other sort of natural process happening. I like those mechanics a lot, and it takes you out of just like a crafting interface or bone mealing something and standing still and just holding right click. It helps you feel, again, a little bit more proactive in achieving those kind of results. So I would love it if there was something like that for small drip leaf. It might be sort of unprecedented that you get hold of a plant that way, but yeah, there might be options for stuff like that to come up in future for sure.
I mean, one of the reasons I bring that up is because the Citadel members and I are actively discussing a custom crafting recipe for spore blossoms.
Right, yeah.
Because they don't affect, like, they're just aesthetic. They don't really do anything other, like, for gameplay. They just look cool.
Yeah.
And they're one of the few blocks from the Lush Caves that are not implemented in a way like finding glowberries in an abandoned mineshaft chest, like finding moss in a shipwreck chest. I know that I saw a recipe from Herbercraft where they're using an allium and drip leaf. But because of the whole spore nature of it, I thought for us, and again, to just add a little gameplay to it, we're thinking of having like a fungi in the center. So something you have to go to the nether to get. We're probably going to use the red one. I don't know. We might decide that either one of them are fine. Having allium in the cardinal directions and then big drip leaf in the corner. So it's like a full 9x9, crafting recipe to get you a spore blossom. I just think it would be kind of neat to kind of increase the, people have to find a flower forest and then do some bone milling, maybe make a flower farm, like just kind of increase the gameplay to kind of get that cool thing.
You're getting stuff from other dimensions and stuff as well. So it feels like more of a journey that you're going on to get that specific item.
Yeah. And that's why I didn't want to make it just like a regular mushroom, because we've been playing on the server for 4 years. So everybody has at least, a stack of mushrooms somewhere, right? Just kind of from early days. If for nothing else, just from cutting down things in a dark oak forest. Like I feel like there's a number of things like that are kind of creeping up in 117 where it's just not quite easy enough. Or as you mentioned, we're relying too much on the RNG for it. And therefore, we're just like, I don't think the data pack outside of this, if we construct it in a way that is in the spirit of, vanilla Minecraft, that it's really outside of the realm. Anybody that streams is going to get the constant question, like, how did you get that? It's like, well, so you have to deal with that. But other than that, like, I feel like the other stuff, I haven't come across any geodes, but I haven't really gone specifically looking for one. And I haven't been using copper a lot yet. So like, where are you on the more, we'll call it like robust or more abundant things that are not tied to wandering traders or loot chests?
Yeah, even though there are viable AFK copper farms now, especially thinking of Nembon's recent design, and copper farms honestly weren't too bad on Bedrock before this. Prowl 8413 has a really good drowned farm that seems to have produced a decent amount of copper, close to a double chest of copper after 3 nights of AFKing, which is not great, but you can get the same amount with probably 3 hours of standard caving. But if you want an AFK means of getting copper, there it is. Same with the Nembon farm, really. But personally, I'm still finding actively looking for copper in caves feels like a more engaging way to get hold of it. And it's more that I don't really like AFKing all that much, and when I would be leaving my computer idle on a server, I would also want to be using my computer to do other things and make other series and edit and everything else. So I don't tend to rely on AFK farms as much, but copper is still very accessible, and I'm very happy about that. I have talked ad infinitum about copper, so I'm not going to go too deep into it, but I think it's nice at least that for the community that likes the more technical builds and likes, being able to farm stuff renewably, Nembon's farm does seem pretty decent and will be even more so as of 117.1. As far as geodes go, I haven't really encountered that many people farming them for amethyst shards yet, because having done a lot of caving now for various other resources, I think I've stumbled upon enough geodes that if I wanted to just go to them, grab a ton of fully grown amethyst crystals, and then leave again, that would put me in good stead for a while. And I'm not at the stage yet where I'm making, a full double chest of tinted glass or anything like that, which I think eventually I will be if we get to making larger scale mob farms. But I think tinted glass is more of like a luxury block than it is a necessity when it comes to those mob farms, right? Like you can still make those with stone and have the tinted glass as just like a 3x3 window to look down into it if you really want to.
Yeah.
So I think aside from, its aesthetics, tinted glass is not too much of a problem, and you can get enough amethyst blocks and calcite and smooth basalt if you want it, if you don't want to farm it from the nether, from a couple of geodes, and you're good for a while, unless you're, again, building something huge. So I honestly think those are pretty accessible just getting hold of them normally. And if you want to start farming that stuff, I think the mechanics of it are simple enough to understand. You know, you've got the amethyst crystals, you can just break them with pistons and collect them using hoppers. That's a fairly easy thing to get hold of for the average person who knows what they're doing with farming. I've also seen some fairly easy approaches to farming glow ink using axolotls, which is a great example of a 1.17 introduced ecosystem where if axolotls will attack anything underwater, then naturally they're going to be ideal for farming this new mob, the glow squid, and getting a ton of glow ink that way. And yeah, just having effectively an AFK glow squid farm. If you're in the area, the squid are going to spawn in a dark room. The axolotls that you put in there kill them, and it just gets funneled into a water stream. I'm not sure if the spawning rules are going to change in 1.18 and break that because of axolotl spawning area being different, glow squid spawning area being different. But for now, at least, it is easy enough to get hold of those materials if you want them. And to be honest, I've still found most of the glow ink that I've got, because I haven't been using much of it, from just, you know, going around an ocean in a boat, and a glow squid will have been killed by something, you know, be it magma blocks or an axolotl, and just glow ink will drift up to the surface from a nearby ravine, and I gather that as I go, and I have enough of the stuff.
I've not really had any use for the glow ink yet, but again, that's probably just because I've been spending so much time in the medieval area. Like, glowing ink is not really something that I need right now. I can see myself using glowing item frames though for in the medieval area, just to kind of get light on a sign, or, you know, make it look like something is more lit up even though there's a lantern nearby, just kind of push that light just a little bit farther so you can see some things. But yeah, any glow ink that I've found, I've just found it on the floor in caves. Like, it's just there. For copper, I've not gone out looking specifically for it. I've just kind of gone caving for all 1.7. Like, Drew just went lighting up caves and just ripping everything out of the walls. Iron, coal, like copper. I find that really engaging now. Like as you mentioned, I like the activity of going out and doing that. Cosmic in our live chat just mentioned that she went out with a server mate, and it was a fun team adventure. You know, just like, we're just going to go for copper. You know, we're going to split the resources when we can come back. We're just going to hang out and chat and, you know, go and mining and stuff. And that kind of stuff is cool too. I know that I want to do the Nembon video farm on the Citadel, but that's a split between a server mate wanting a lot of copper for a big build, and the two of us just wanting to do a really big technical build together. Like, it's partly to do the build, not just that we want copper. And maybe that's a thing where it's not going to be a server farm. Like, maybe that's going to be their farm, you know, and they're going to be the one that has the copper. Because one of the things that I wish we did a little bit better on the Citadel server is an economy. No one needs diamonds. We've been on the server for 4 years. Everybody's got plenty. But in terms of the new blocks, and in terms of things like me making this moss farm, there's enough people that wanted moss in the server. I thought a community farm would be the better way to go. I think what I might do is say, like, all right, well, this is all community stuff, but I'm going to call the bone meal from this mine, you know, and say I'm going to have the bone meal on the server. So if people want that, then maybe we can trade for blocks. Because mostly that's what we do for an economy, is like, I need this. Do you have X? And, you know, like dark oak for bone meal, or like whatever that happens to be. And so that kind of stuff is cool. And I'd like to try and work more of that into it. For copper, that would be kind of fun if somebody, similar to what you folks are doing on the Empire's SMP, you know, like some people are like sticking their flag in the ground and saying, like, I am the copper person, or I am the ocean queen, or whatever. I think that's a cool way to approach things. As far as calcite and amethyst go, my concern is that I do want a fair amount of tinted glass for the Modern City project on the Citadel, because I think that would be very cool to be able to use in those cases. And I like the idea of getting a farm going. The thing that I find tricky with geodes is that I kind of want them to be nearby. So I don't want to set up a farm in a random geode that I find. I want to try and find a geode close to something like the Modern City, or close to the medieval town, or just some close to some place where people are playing a lot. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people are playing in the older chunks on the server. Those didn't get trimmed. Like, those are still 1.7, well, they're 1.12 chunks really. So like, it's just there, you have to go farther afield. So I'm trying to figure out where would be a good spot to build like an amethyst geode farm. And for me, like if I'm going to branch out in the medieval area to a place where I'm going to build like an elven area, which in my imagination has a lot of like white and purple and blue. And so I'm thinking like, okay, now I would know if I can find a geode near that build, that would be an ideal spot, because that's going to grow all the time, because I'm going to be on the surface doing things and building things,
Yeah.
stuff like that. So I have not looked into that too much, but I think from what I've seen, like I've seen some content creators that have amethyst geodes that have like 10, 12 budding amethyst in them. Like it's a lot. And the farms look really complicated to the point where it might be just worth it, as you said, to just harvest it and then come back, on a timer, and say, oh, time to go harvest the geode, because it looks fairly straightforward. I think too that calcite is another thing on the list of things that we might try and create a crafting recipe for. I don't know what that looks like. I'd imagine it would involve quartz, and something else. I'm not sure what. Probably quartz in like an amethyst shard or something like that, in the spirit of where it's coming from, and just to try and get a little bit more of it. It's one of those things where most blocks in Minecraft are renewable in some shape or form, or if they're not, there's just deserts of sand, like there's just, you can get tons of dirt and stone from anywhere, I feel like having something as cool as calcite and having so little of it, if you wanted to use a lot of it, is a little bit frustrating. So we might look at that. I don't know. It depends. We might go looking for geodes and find 12 of them and it's like, actually, maybe we don't need a recipe. I don't know.
Yeah. There are some geodes that are just enormous as well. So, like, if you found little geodes and you're like, oh, I only got a couple of stacks of calcite, is that normal? And then you find one that's about 4 times the size,
right?
And suddenly you have more calcite than you really know what to do with. The other stuff I wanted to think about briefly was there being old resources that can be farmed in new ways, and I haven't looked into lava dripstone farms yet.
Right.
But they seem reasonable. They are maybe a touch slow, but again, it's about scaling up. If something happens slowly, then you make 40 or 50 of them, and then you wait for all of the lava to fill up at once, and then you have 50 buckets of lava you didn't have before, compared to just waiting for 1 or 2 cauldrons to fill. So I'm kind of curious, once we start farming a bit more of the pointed dripstone, to see how that all comes together. And like I said, azalea saplings are now my new favorite way to farm oak, because it also gets you rooted dirt. The saplings seem to take less bone meal to grow than oak does. The only downside to it is that you have to use bone meal, where normally an oak sapling would just grow into a tree on its own, given enough time and light. Yeah. But then, aside from that, they've got more oak wood per tree, typically, unless you count the giant oaks, but they are mostly leaves. The leaves in azalea are really nice. They drop more saplings. Like it kind of repeats back on itself, and they're pretty usable in my experience. So I'm curious to see if that remains. But for now, I think this has given us a couple of really neat ways to farm resources that we're used to farming in other ways. I think the Axolotl glow ink farm can very easily be repurposed into a standard open air squid farm, and you wouldn't get glow squid in that because you have to have access to the sky, which is the opposite of glow squid. So just throw a couple of axolotls into a spawning pool for squid, and there's no need for all of the fence gates and signs and all of the other stuff anymore.
I like the idea of using axolotls to farm stuff like that. Like it's almost too bad that you can't get a spawning mechanic for just natural fish. Because it would be cool to have like a fish farm, or I feel like it's almost like I want more animals in Minecraft to have more food or breeding sources. Like I know this isn't the case, but let's just use like sea turtles as an example. Instead of kelp, like what if they ate fish, right? So it would be really cool if you could hook up an axolotl fish farm to then supply you with all the fish that you wanted to breed your turtles. Like that kind of interactivity, I think would be really neat. But I haven't really thought much about the axolotls. I mean, they're cute, and I put them in a bucket when I can, because I'm sure I'll find a decorative use for them down the line. But I don't see myself going and using them in things like a guardian raid, or like going to hunt drowned in the ocean, stuff like that. I don't know. It seems like a hassle for not a lot of benefit,
Yeah, I think in terms of using them for standard survival gameplay and then being like the kind of ocean equivalent of wolves, I don't know if I see that working out. It may be, I think it's something that you have to do for an advancement, so it'll be something that I try at some stage.
Sure.
But I don't know how many of them are going to survive. Although they may have made those mechanics a little bit more robust since I tried them out in the snapshots. So we will see. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff to farm is what I'm learning, and farming is some of the only way we can get hold of it for now. But obviously, we're looking forward to some of this stuff being added in future in 1.18. For now, though, I think that's where we're going to leave it for this episode of the Spawn Chunks. Thank you so much for listening, folks. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff that we've talked about today at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and the Spawn Chunks is proud as ever to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, please consider putting some value back in at patreon.com/thespawnchunks, where joining our community, pledging at any level, gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can listen to the show live as it is recorded in Discord every Monday. And it also gets us closer to our next goal, which is a monthly Minecraft audio hangout, where we'll be able to sit down and chat with our patrons about what they've been doing in Minecraft that month. We're currently at 257 patrons, which is up one from last week's 256, so thank you to that extra person for making the leap, jumping on board. And we have a new content engineer patron to thank, so along with General Patton 82, Hunter 555, Jumbo Sale, and Yitz, thank you Magma Cube Dude for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on Twitter and Instagram. Personal recommendations are by far the best way to share the podcast. Just poke a friend in the arm from a safe distance, tell them to go listen to The Spawn Chunks, and let them know that they can listen on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and of course, YouTube. You can email the show at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com and let us know how your 117 farms are doing, or anything else you want to talk about. The RSS feed is linked on thespawnchunks.com, and of course, the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That is where you can get the extended version of the podcast, The Render Distance.
My name is Johnny, but online I go by Pixelriffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/Pixelriffs, where I'm currently running the Empires SMP and the Hardcore Survival Guide side by side. I stream 3 days a week on Twitch, doing behind-the-scenes work for those series, and might have a few updates from the Survival Guide Museum here and there as well. I'm also the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search, and aside from that, I'm at Pixelriffs on both Twitter and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Everything I'm doing online, including my illustration and design portfolio, is at joelduggan.com. You can listen to my other podcast, The Citadel Cafe, at thecitadelcafe.com, where I talk about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. You can follow me on social media at Joel Duggan, and of course on Twitch at Joel Duggan. I am building a medieval city and doing some cool farms in 1.17 in Minecraft. Looking to do some bonus streams this week. I might even have another stream up today. And I've got some art streams coming up. I'm going to be doing some Twitch graphics for friends in the community. So check that out at twitch.tv/JoelDuggan.
Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, and it ain't gonna farm itself.